Hello everyone, my name is Pawan and in this lecture we will understand how often we end up into bad component design if we do not put conscious efforts and what are the ways to avoid it. So let's build some real world component. Here you can see we need to build a form that has three sections which is customer, vehicle and other information. We have separate API for each section. There are total 4 APIs, one for order and 3 for vehicle, customer and other information respectively. And for simplicity we have taken up all the fields as input. Now the first and foremost requirement is until we receive the complete data it should show a loader. So let me refresh this screen and here you can see we are calling 3 APIs. So let me show the developers tool and look the log. Here you can see all the 4 API are called order, customer, vehicle and other information. And once we received all the information where customer, vehicle and other information depends upon order data, and until we receive the complete data we are showing the loader, and once we get the information then we are going to display the form. Now the second requirement is in the footer or toolbar we should show 3 basic buttons which is save, discard and refresh. Save and discard button should be disabled when the component is loaded first time or form is invalid. So here you can see we have 2 required field. One is email which is already filled and other one is odometer reading. So this save button and discard button they are disabled because we have loaded the form for the first time and now we have touched the information and we have filled the odometer reading. The form is valid and it is no more pristine. So in that case save and discard button should be enabled. And the functionality of refresh button is pretty clear. When we click on this button it will refresh the form. Third requirement is when you fill the form and you haven't saved it, and if you click on some other route, for example if I am clicking this login button, then it should ask a confirmation whether you want to stay or leave this page. If we select no, then we will stay on the same page, and if we click yes we will be navigated to the new route. Now the next requirement is if you do not have roles and rights. So if we do not have update right to this component, then in that case all the fields should be disabled except this refresh button. So let's go back to the code and implement it. Let me show you how can we do that. Let me go to the right service and update right should be false. So this is how it should look like. Let me save and show it to the UI. It will reload the frame. Let's wait. It is loading the data and you can see we do not have rights to update this screen. Then in that case all the fields should be disabled as well as the buttons. So these are all the requirements. Let's see how do we formulate this component. Now firstly we create the form. We declare a form. For simplicity we are using untyped form, and then in the constructor we inject form builder. In ng-on-init method we create a create form method, and in the create form we are simply creating a reactive form which contains all the fields. So email and odometer reading are required field, and then I am exposing some getters for all these fields. So these fields are useful in the HTML. So let's go to the HTML. Let me save it and let's go to the HTML. Here you can see we have declared a form. In the form group we have given the reference of form, and then all the fields are created. Email, telephone, all 3 sections are created using the field set, and this is how it looks. So let's go to the UI. So here you can see all 3 sections with the form is completed. Next we get the data for the form. So let's go back to the VS Code. We inject the dependencies, so write service, data service and activated route, and in ng-on-init we are subscribing this activated route.params, and we receive the id from route and store it into order id variable. Now we get the rights for the form, and we are going to call this get right API. And if we have rights to update this form, then we are assigning it into the has rights variable. In the subscribe of write API, we are going to call the data service and assign the data in the order data variable. So here you can see I have declared order data variable, and this is assigned once we receive the response from get order data API. One thing to note here, that we are calling this get order data API into subscription of this activated route. The reason is we are dependent on the order ID which is received from this parameter. Now we are going to call other three APIs which depend upon the order data. So first we are going to call get customer data, and once the response is received, we are storing the data into customer data variable, and then we are going to call vehicle data and then other information data, and we are storing the information in three variables, which is customer data, vehicle data, and other information. Now why are we calling these nested call? Because one of the requirement is we need to show the loader until the data is received. So here at this point of time, we can be sure that all the data is received and we can close the loader. Now we are going to declare a variable is all data received, and we make it true when we receive the complete data. So this dot is all data received equal to true when the third API is called. Let's make the changes in HTML. Here we are going to declare ng template and ng container, and we will wrap the form into ng container. So now it's form, and in ng container we are going to write if we receive the data, then we are going to show this form, else we are going to show this template, which is where we are showing the met progress bar. Let's save the data and go to the UI. So let me open the browser and refresh the screen. You can see we are showing the met progress bar until we receive the data. So let's wait for 2-3 seconds, and here we go, we get the form and met progress bar is disappeared. Now let's fill up the form with the data we received. So let's go back to the VS Code, and here we are going to fill the form. So here you can see we are fetching the fields, for example email.patch value, and what data we received from the customer data, which is there in get customer data API. And if we have rights, then we are making this field enable and disable. So same is done with all the fields. Let's see how it looks in UI. So perfect. So here we got all the data and filled this form. Now let's implement footer. So here in HTML, we are going to write this footer, and footer contains three buttons: save, discard, and refresh. And here you can see save and discard button will be disabled when the user doesn't have rights to update or form is pristine or invalid, and refresh button will always be enabled. Now we will implement these click handlers: save button, discard, and refresh. Let's save and go to the TS file, and here we are going to implement this click handler. So on save button click, we are calling save data API, and we collect the information from the form and we subscribe it. On discard button click, we are going to reset the form and fill all the form fields with the data we have stored in class level variables, which is customer data, vehicle data, and other information. And on refresh button click, we are going to reset the form, and we are making this flag as false, that we haven't received the flag yet, and we are calling the ng onInit method. Let's save and go to the browser. I have saved it, and let me go to the browser. Let me reload the screen. So it will take some time to load the form. Okay, so save and discard buttons are disabled because the form is pristine. Let's make this form dirty, but still these buttons are disabled, the reason is form is invalid because odometer reading is required field. So let me make some change here. Alright, now the buttons are enabled because form is valid. Now discard button click, when we click here, it will reset the form and fill the initial information. So you can see the pin which I modified is stored to its original value, and the refresh button will work as the form will be reset and data will be fetched from the APIs. So far we have filled two requirements. First one is implementation of loader and second one is implementation of the footer. Now the other requirement is when we are in the middle of the changes of the form. So here we haven't saved our changes and we click on other route, it should ask for pop-up. So we are going to implement this thing using can deactivate route card. So here in app routing we are going to use can deactivate card. There is a separate video for this card, you can have a look on it. So in this card we are targeting those components which implement can deactivate interface, and this contains a method which is going to return a boolean, and if the component has can deactivate method, it is going to call inject the service, open the dialog and ask the user's response whether he want to stay or leave the page. So let's implement this interface here in the component. So we are going to implement can deactivate, and here we are going to return the form.touched property. So if form is touched, pop-up will open, it will ask the user whether you want to stay or you want to leave the page, and based on the response we will either stay on the page or we will navigate to the route. So let's save and look into the browser. Let's make some changes in the form and click on login button. So here it is asking for the confirmation, and based on the response we are navigated to the route. One more thing, when we are done with the form and click on save button multiple times. So here I have clicked 3-4 times and you can see our API is called multiple times. So we need to disable the save button until we receive the response. Let's see how can we implement it. Let's go to the VS Code, and here we are going to declare a variable is save button clicked, and on click of button we are making it true, and once we receive the response we are making it false again, and we are going to save it. And in the HTML we will set along with all other properties to disable this button. So we are going to use it here, and let's save it and let's go to the code again. Let's wait for the response and make some changes. I'm going to click save button multiple times. So here you can see the button is disabled until we receive the response. Now we are done with the bad design. So let's see what are the disadvantages of it. So here you can see it violates the single responsibility principle. So suppose there is one more section comes into play, for example order history. So we will make the change in HTML, we will make the change in form, we will call the API and store the data into one more variable, and you can see the line of code will be increased in the same component. Now second disadvantage is lots of nested call which results into callback hell. So if you look into the code, there are lots of nested call, and in real world complex forms these calls can be increased to the 10 or 12 times. So you can see it is very difficult to manage the data when the calls are nested. Third disadvantage is we are managing the state imperatively. So if you look at here in the HTML, if we want to disable the form based on the order status, then again what we are going to do, we will create one more variable order status, and then we will fit it here into this disabled expression of these buttons. So in real world forms you can see these disabled expressions are very complex and at times hard to manage, and as well as we need to make the changes in the form if it affects the form as well. Other disadvantage is our form is really very large, then in that case lots of change detection cycle runs, and it results into performance issues. Okay, now we will design the good component, and our approach will be based on these 4 pillars. So first we'll focus on segregation, then we will focus on reactive programming instead of imperative programming, and for optimization we will rely on push change detection strategy, and with the segregation we are going to use some design patterns. So let's see how do we design the good component.